What's up? Patch notes finally just dropped a few minutes ago, and I decided I will actually go ahead and do a stream of reading through the patch notes. So let's see what we've got here. And I noticed there are actually some ascendancy changes for other classes other than the ones that got major reworks. That's good. I was kind of thinking there would be. So, Settlers of Kalguur League, we don't need to read that. New content and features. Crushing Fist, Vengeful Cry. Oh, interesting. There's also Retaliate against a Savage Hit with War Cry. Okay, so it'll be cool when we get to see some more actual gem information on some of this stuff. If I can get my chat to load up here. I don't actually know why my restream chat is not loading up. Let's just go to YouTube real quick and make sure I'm actually live here. View my channel. This says upcoming, but that's nonsense. It'll be cool when we get to see some more. I am live here, so see if I can get my chat to actually work here. Not sure why my chat is not coming up. Very odd. Can I just refresh this? Very strange. I guess what I'll do is just go to Restream website. And yeah, we're streaming. I think there's a way that I can just pull my chat directly here. Events, video storage, team. Sadie, hush, little dog. Little dogger, little doggo whining. Oh, Sadie, now you're choking. She always eats so much food without freaking chewing any of it, and then she chokes for the next half hour. Gosh, I haven't done any of this in so long. Is there a way I can just like pop out my chat from here? Docs chat. Can I do that to reload the chat? Okay, there we go. I just had to reload the chat in OBS. Hi, Sadie. Good girl. Let's see if my little dog wants a treat here to settle her down now that she ate all her food. Been giving her a tiny treat after she eats her food because she's been really picky about her food and stuff lately. Good girl, Sadie. So I've been trying to encourage her to eat her food more regularly. Good girl. Alrighty. So, yeah, it'll be nice when we get the numbers on more of these. They've only got a couple of these shown on the main league page at the moment, unfortunately. But Crushing Fist, retaliate against a blocked hit by slamming a huge armored fist into the ground. Nice. Vengeful Cry, retaliate against a savage hit with a war cry, taunting all nearby enemies to attack the user. The user and nearby allies gain a buff that grants rage. Say to get out of there. And prevents rage from being lost. Does it actually do any damage, or is this like a support for a war cry gem? I don't know. We'll see. New Strength Support Gem, Overexertion, supports melee attack spells that can be exerted, causing them to deal more damage for each Warcry exerting them. Definitely big for slam skills in general, potentially, but especially for Bleed/Ignite, which my initial impressions is that I'm probably going to be starting the league with a Bleed melee build. Eviscerate, that is one of the ones that is actually on the page, as is Sword Storm. Strength Dexterity, Support Gem, Expert Retaliation. Supports retaliation skills, causing them to have more cooldown recovery and become usable for longer. Alright, so that kind of goes along with one of the new Gladiator nodes as well, if you want to focus on those retaliation skills. Added new Dex Strength Skill Gem, Glacial Shield Swipe. Retaliate against a blocked hit with a sweep of your shield. Interesting, so they did add some retaliations for shield skills in particular as well. That's cool. New Dex Strength Support Gem, Rupture. Critical strikes that inflict bleeding also inflict Rupture. Oh yeah, that's the old Deadeye node. We saw that in the video. Divine Retribution, that one's on the page. It's a spell retaliation. Add a new Arsenal of Vengeance Keystone passive to the southwest of the duelist's starting location. Arsenal of Vengeance provides damaging retaliation skills become usable every 6th hit from enemies instead, rather than having a cooldown. I don't know if that sounds great. Added 60 new armor base types. Yep, we saw the new base type stuff in the video. Got Gratis Signet, yeah, those are the uniques from last league. Added 15 new uniques, 5 new div cards, 72 more foiled uniques. We saw these new chisels in the video, that's pretty cool. 3 new Grandmasters, icons to monster health bars to state whether they are armor. Interesting. Blah 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 and that stuff. Alright, melee totem skills removed, as we saw. That is excellent. Compensate with both the damage on almost every single melee skill. Yep, so no more Protector, War Chief, Ancestral War Chief, or Earthbreaker. And people who purchased those microtransactions will have them removed and the points will be returned. Forbidden Shaco and Replica Dragon Fang's Flight with any of their move gems will now provide a different gem. Alright, that makes sense. Here we go, I was wondering what they were going to do with Dawnstrider. Dawnstrider unique boots no longer provide the buff of your totems, yep, or the linger, or the maximum buff. Now has Socketed Slam gems, are supported by level 25 Earthbreaker. Oh, interesting. So they got rid of it in general, but they added it back to these boots if you still want to do Slam totems. And it provides Ancestral Bond. Also has 3 to 5% of damage from hits is taken from your nearest totem's life before you. Interesting, I guess. It's nice that it provides Ancestral Bond, so you don't have to cross the tree or use Wilma's or whatever, but you're limited to a 5-link there because there's no other way to get an extra support on those boots, so I don't think anyone will actually ever use those, unfortunately, but that's alright. Got rid of the Ancestor Totem's Linger. The large wheel of totem passives has been removed, that's expected. Panopticon has been removed. Ironwood has been moved to a second notable in the Shamanistic Fury totem cluster. That makes sense. No longer provides armor per summon totem or totem Elirez. Grants totem life and 40% fizz damage reduction. Interesting. Surveillance notable passive now has its own cluster to the southeast of the duelist starting location with 3 small passives. Oh, Sadie. Little dog sneezing. A little baby dog. Let's see if this little dog wants to come up here. Running around being spazzo now. I guess she doesn't want to come up here. Oh, what you doing, Sadie? You came back again? My little baby dog. Come here, little dog. Come here, little dog. Oh, Sadie, you're so silly. Tough doing videos and streams when you got a new little puppy around. Come here, baby dog. Come here, baby dog. I'll be right back, guys. I'm gonna play with my dog for a sec here. She's going spastic. Alright. I captured her. There's my little dog, Sadie. My little one-eyed dog. She's looking this way so you can't see, but she only has one eye. See if she'll sit here and calm down for a little while. Probably not. She usually doesn't stay in one place on my lap for too long. Alrighty. So, the Ancestral Guidance Cluster Jewel no longer provides Ancestor Totem effect. Yep, got rid of all that stuff. All makes sense. Banner rework, we saw this in the video. Got some new banner skills. I'm not going to spend too much time focusing over the passive tree stuff because I'm just going to wait until new passive tree info is released and path of building or whatever is updated. 3 endurance and frenzy charges when you consume maximum valor to place the banner. Interesting. Alright, banners also maim enemies. Oh, these are the passive masteries for banners. 5 valor when you warcry if able, remove random ailment. Alright, cool. We'll have to see exactly what the banner gems themselves do, so we'll wait for info on that. Rage rework. Rage has been made more fundamental and discoverable. Alright, this dog wants down. There you go, dog. Alright. Rage now grants 1% more attack damage per rage gain to a maximum of 30, but it no longer grants attack speed or move speed. You lose 10 rage every second if you have not been hit or gained rage in the past 2 seconds. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how these changes pan out with the skills that consume rage. Previously was 1 rage every 0.5 seconds. Yeah, holy moly, you lose it really fast. Many sources of rage now generate rage much more quickly, and there is a shared cooldown preventing you from generating any rage on hit for more than 1 hit every 0.5 seconds. Oh wow. That seems bad, but we'll see how much rage you can actually gain per hit. Rage effect applies to the damage inherently granted by rage, and other bonuses granted per X rage. If you have any bonuses, will you have a certain amount of rage or other effects that refer to your rage but do not cause rage to grant additional stats are not affected. Alright, so the Berserker Ascendancy and Rage. Related skill gems have received changes as a result. These are detailed in their respective sections below. Alright. Chainbreaker, Timeless Keystone Passive, and Count Spirit Unique Gloves have been updated to state that their regeneration stats do not delay the inherent loss of rage. Alright, interesting. The Bear's Girdle Unique Belt no longer grants physical damage per 10 rage. It now has plus 10 maximum rage. Interesting. Calm's Primacy, no longer 1 rage on hit with critical attacks. Instead, it now just grants a flat 5 rage on melee hit. Interesting. Unfortunately, it's such a weak axe that it doesn't really matter, but could be a reasonable starter, quick way to get some rage early on. Ravenous Passion no longer grants attack speed instead of cast speed. It now has gained 7 or 10 rage after spending a total of 200 mana. Interesting, but the damage is still just attack damage. Rigwald's has plus 10 to maximum rage wielding a sword, previously 25. Maltreatment Axe implicit modifier, 3 rage on melee hit and 4 rage on melee hit, previously was maximum rage. Psychotic Axe is 5 rage on melee hit. Interesting. A new Battle Trance cluster has been added to the northwest of the... What are you whining about, dog? Has been added to the northwest Marauder's starting location, which provides 10 maximum rage. That's a lot for 1 passive on the tree. Vengeance Cluster has been added to the southwest. Vengeance provides each rage also grants 1% increased armor and gain 3 rage when you are hit by an enemy. Alright. Would that share in the cooldown, generating rage on hit? I wonder. Hi, Sadie. Good girl. A new Savage... Sadie, no crying. No crying. Come on. I wish this little dog would just come up here and sit with me instead of running around crying. Come here, Sadie. Come here. There's a little baby. If she'll just sit here for a little while. Veteran's Wrath. Veteran's Wrath provides 2 rage on melee hit and inherent rage loss starts 1 second later. Interesting. 2 rage on melee hit, that's 4 per second with the shared cooldown on 1 cluster to get up to 30%. That seems pretty good to get on pretty much any attack damage based rage character. It was general attack damage, right? Not like melee attack damage. It's just 1% more attack damage, so it's not limited to melee. That's good. Oh, you want to get down again, Sadie? There you go. New rage masteries. Every rage also grants 1% increased stun threshold, increased movement speed per 5 rage. Meh. Plus 7 maximum rage and inherent loss of rage is faster. War cries grant 1 rage per 5 enemy power up to 5. Increased maximum total life recovery per second from leech while at maximum rage, and nearby enemies are intimidated when you have rage. Interesting. They significantly simplified it overall, but still strong, so definitely something you're gonna probably want to go for on any attack-based build. Tinctures, I don't know how I feel about the new tincture things. Because Weeping Wounds instead of mana burn, draining your life instead of your mana. Alright, so there are some tincture-specific nodes. Flask adjacent to applied tincture, gain 2 charges when you hit an enemy with a weapon, no more than once every second. Pretty good also, potentially. New Perfected Formula Cluster, 15% chance for tincture not to inflict mana burn and causes tinctures applied to you at 10% reduced mana burn rate. Sadie, silly dog. No, Sadie. Colloidal mixture causes tinctures applied to you to have increased effect and additional increased effect if you used a life flask recently. Sadie, quit whining. What'd you do? Come here. Come here. Come here. Sadie, come on. Come here. Come here. Hey, baby. Just lay down for a bit. Let's see here. Sadie, you're okay. Just lay down, little baby dog. Just lay down while I go through these notes. Alright, retaliation skills require you to meet a certain condition, then you can unleash devastation. Counterattack skills have been removed, as expected. They're switched to new gems, the existing gems, alright. And looks like there are actually retaliation nodes on the tree as well. Increased stun duration and fortify, increased area of effect, gain 5 rage on hit with retaliation skills. The other notable, cruel retort, every 4th retaliation skill always critically strikes. Skill, what do we got? 25% chance when you use a retaliation skill for a different one to become usable, and they become usable for 30% longer. Debilitate has been replaced with 30% chance to avoid being stunned while holding a shield, and some new masteries for retaliations. Duration of ailments inflicted by retaliation. Retaliation skills debilitate, increased armor for each different one you've used in the past 10 seconds, 10% chance when you use a retaliation skill for a different one to become usable, and 40% reduced cost. Alright. I still don't think retaliation skills are likely to see a ton of usage based on what we've seen so far, but it looks like if you invest into them, they will actually be pretty strong. To encounter the Wildwood, yep, and you can find the Nameless Seer lurking in maps randomly. Scry a map, yeah, we've seen that. Big shuffle of div cards. New fragment, yeah, Audience with the King, we saw that. Here we go. Nametaker, Flawed Refuge, and Trickster's Smile are now back in the Wildwood. Meh. None of those are really desirable anyways, though Nametaker I think does have some applications. Though with new Volpact on the tree, that might be a little questionable at this point. You can discover Reflective Mist. Yeah, this one was really interesting. You can get a randomly one that was inverted, or you can slap one in there to try and invert some. So I imagine you might see some crazy Doriani's prototype builds against this league with negative lightning resistance, or some negative AoE and negative proj speed shenanigans like we saw during Kalandra. Monsters killed from all leagues and additional content can now drop maps. Previously, most of them were prevented from dropping maps. Oh, that's cool. And Scarabs, Chisels, and Horizon Orbs follow the same drop. They're consumed proportionally to endgame maps. They do not drop more with additional party members. The intention is to keep the number of these items dropping always proportional to the number of map items dropping. Alright. Scarab of Bisection, which allows you to select the nullify prefixes or nullify suffixes crafting option. Oh, interesting. So you can knock the prefixes or suffixes off a map if you need to. What else we got? Invasion causes rare monsters to create additional beyond portals, previously just unique. Blight Scarab of the Blight Heart no longer provides blight oils or 1 tier higher. Instead, it causes encounters in area to have 1 blighted chest. Blight encounters in area spawn war waves of enemies, and blighted chests in area grow larger and more rewarding the more blighted enemies are slain. Delirium area increase 50% with fast distance mirror. Divination Scarab of the Cloister, which is what now? 8 to 12 additional packs of Dwagers Devoted. Have a 1% additional chance to drop a stacked deck. Divination Scarab of Curation. I don't super care about these because I never run Divination Scarabs. I've never really been into div card farming. Div cards which drop an area are stolen by the final map boss, has increased toughness and damage the more they've stolen, and duplicates all cards with the defeated. Alright, that one's actually pretty interesting. Domination of Abnormality. Domination Scab of Apparitions now causes it to contain 2 additional apparition shrines. I wonder, Domination of Teaching, what did they do? It now causes an area to contain an additional evolving shrine instead of causing shrines. Does an evolving shrine, I'm guessing, give you a temporary XP boost? So they nerfed the mega XP strategy of sticking a bunch of shrine buffs on yourself, so no more 98 to 100 in 2 hours. The or more like 30 minutes if you are hyper optimized. Cartography Scarab is now of Escalation. Increased maps found in area for each map modifier instead of preventing. Okay. Cartography Scarab of Ascension has gone to Risk, causes an area to have an additional random modifier. Okay. Cartography Scarab of Duplication causes an area to contain additional packs of difficult and rewarding monsters that drop 300% increased maps, instead of causing the maps found in the area to have a chance to be duplicated. Alright. Harbinger Scarab of Discernment is now of Obelisks. It no longer causes Harbingers in the area to drop rare currency shards or drop a single type. Instead, it causes them to spawn empowered obelisks, which drop currency shards. Alright. Horned Scarab of Tradition, transform reward modifier, and no longer. Alright. I'm skimming over some of this stuff because reading a bunch of Scarab changes is boring. Been renamed to the Scarab of Divinity. No longer causes an area to contain additional clusters of mysterious barrels. Instead, it has an additional rare monster will be Pantheon touched. Interesting. Titanic Scarab. No longer increased unique items. Instead, it grants unique monsters increased toughness, damage, rarity, and quantity per pack size. Alright. Of Overlords is now of Treasures. It now causes unique monsters to have 2 additional rewards and 30% increased toughness. What exactly is toughness? Is that resistance to physical damage? I'm not sure. Or is that just like damage reduction for monsters? I don't know exactly what that keyword means. Here we go, Ritual Scarab. I'm planning on, to this point, have been planning on running Ritual. The Ritual Scarab of Recognition has been renamed and no longer provides. Okay, I wasn't planning on using this Scarab generally anyways. Ritual altars in areas spawn a Wildwood Wisp, and Wildwood Wisps grant 50% increased tribute gained to nearby players. Interesting. So maybe you do want to chuck one of those in now, because that'd be a lot of extra tribute. I'd have to look at what the other Scarabs are and decide on that. Scarab of Wisps now causes the monsters to have a chance to be empowered by 2,000 Wildwood Wisps. Jeez. Previously 500. Oh wow, they really nerfed down the quantity on that Sulfite Scarab of Fumes. Alright. And they got rid of quite a few Scarabs. Interesting. Also reviewed the limit for how many of each Scarab can be used alongside a single map. Interesting, so that might affect which Scarabs I use for Ritual as well. Made adjustments where necessary. After socketing your first Voidstone, you can now hover over T14 and higher maps and view what Tier 17 map can be dropped there. Monsters on T17s have less life and less damage. T17 maps are now modifiable only with Chaos, Vault, and Chisels. They also now drop with random quality. The Union of Souls can no longer roll on non-Valdos maps. Map modifiers have increased item rarity to quantity ratios, more in line with regular map modifiers. One thing I wasn't sure on looking in the reveal video is it looked like perhaps they don't have the giant increase to currency and scarabs on them anymore, but I'm not totally sure on that. Double anointed amulets can drop in Blight Ravage. That's pretty interesting for blight farming. Getting some good double anointed amulets that you can actually craft on. Of course, it's not going to be as cool as doing like a Strangle Charm where you get 4 and then corrupt it into a good one, but you can actually craft a good amulet with 2 desirable double anoints on it potentially. Monsters in ultimatum encounters drop loot again. Alright, good. Hordes now drop more items in Abyssal Depths. And yeah, I got like Black Morgan, for example, in regular Einhar missions now. Janus, so I like that. I like how the Black Morgan made 6 linking a lot more accessible, and now it should be even more accessible, so I think that's great. I still think socket linking is one of the more just annoying, tedious things in Path of Exile at this point, so I'm glad for that getting easier and easier. Now I have a chance to find a Gloom Shrine. Divine Shrines are rare and have a duration of 20 seconds. Drop rates on all those puzzle boxes. Map changes, I don't care on those. Some of the map bosses you are required to upgrade your Pantheon have changed. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they got rid of the first 15 waves from Simulacrum. Excellent. Ritual. Yeah, corpses that you use, this is relevant to me. Probably planning on doing a ritual farming strategy near the beginning of the league. Corpses that you can use to raise as specters can now be found as a reward. These corpses have been rebalanced to be appropriate for the core game compared to their debut in Affliction. That makes sense, but some of them might still be quite valuable. The lowest tier ritual bases cannot be found in maps, and the highest tier can only be found in maps with an area level, so T16 or higher. The Archdemon Crown modifier is now, -2 level of socketed support and +2 level of socketed skill gems instead of the exposure. That's quite interesting. Brimstone Treads is now block and stun recovery and reduce stun threshold. I mean, that's good if you're doing a blood notch thing, I guess. Get you even a little bit more block and stun recovery and lower your threshold even more. Kind of makes sense. Debilitation Gauntlets are now thwarting gauntlets. They have chance to block attack damage, and you take some damage from blocked hits. Replaces the exerted attacks, deal increased damage. Alright, interesting. Dream Quest Slippers now 10% reduced move speed, but up to 50% increased cooldown recovery rate of movement skills. Trap Setter Gloves no longer provide reduced attack damage with main hand. Okay, instead they provide reduced cooldown recovery rate for traps, but 25% increased duration. That's bad. Nobody will ever want to use that. Penitent Mask Implicit Modifier. Whoa, plus 4% maximum chaos res. That's really strong in combination with Divine Flesh. I think you're going to be seeing probably quite a few Penitent Mask usages, though I think it does still make you crushed. I'm not really going to read through all these again. These Atlas passive notes, that's something I would rather just look on a tree once the tree is updated. Anything for ritual, I'll look here. Beyond, Artifacts of the Vault, Seance, no. Planning on possibly doing Incursion as well. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, alright, so nothing for ritual on Atlas Passive Tree. The way that quantity and rarity of items drop from extra content has been changed. We've generally added quantity or rarity bonuses to a number of mechanics, such as Essences or Delirium. We've also added drops back to some leagues where it wasn't present before, like Ultimatum. A major change we've made alongside is that we've changed a lot of the quantity and rarity bonuses on monsters to prevent things from multiplying out of control at the very top end. Yeah, they were talking about that in the Q&A, trying to avoid a meat sack type situation. Yeah, no more player item quantity, that's good. And so they're just going through all these things that used to give quantity, and they now give different things, or nothing where they used to give it. Interesting. Don't really care about MF. Player balance. Corpses spawned by the Desecrate and Corpse Walk skills now have a flat 15% chance to match your specters, rather than a 15% chance on top of being added to the main pool of corpse varieties. These spectral corpses are now unusable for most purposes, and can only be used by minion skills such as Raise Spectre and Bone Offering. Alright, so here's the DD nerfs people have been asking for. You can no longer fill up your Spectre pool and your Desecrate pool with super high HP corpses that you can then blow up with Detonate Dead. That's good. And spectral corpses can only spawn if you have the raised specter skill. Itemized corpses now spawn spectral corpses. Player spawn corpses are no longer affected by modifiers and maps. I'm not a DD expert. I've not played any of the DD stuff, but I know that a very large portion of your high damage comes from those high HP pool specters that you put in your desecrate pool. So with that no longer being a thing, I think that's a pretty significant nerf to DD builds. Like I said, I'm not an expert on that, so I can't give you a percentage, but I think that's a pretty large nerf. Let's see. Endurance charges, as we learned, now grant additional LE damage reduction. That's really strong. You generally didn't really care about the little percent of LE resistance from endurance charges because you wanted to be capped without that anyways. Ward, oh wow, they cut the ward restore in half. And dual wielding now inherently grants 20% chance to block attack damage instead of was 15 and 10% more attack speed. Interesting. Well, I think it was already 10% more attack speed. I think this 15 is actually just referring to this here. Skills that use basic melee strike animations now have a more consistent swing speed rather than the first swing. Good. Nobody liked that really slow first speed on those multi-hit strike skills. Player minions are no longer targetable by enemies while you have the grace period buff. Good. You can no longer be stunned while performing a vol skill before the contact point has been reached. Interesting. We're about to get into skill gem changes here, which I really care about for the melee skills. Speaking of all skills, like I said, I'm strongly leaning towards starting with some kind of melee bleed build. And it may well be Ground Slam, just because Vol Ground Slam already has like a massive damage effectiveness compared to any other melee skill. And I imagine with the changes, it's probably going to be really freaking huge now. And Vol Ground Slam, unless they change it here, unlike other Vol skills, can be exerted by war cries and stuff. So I think you could do a pretty freaking enormous bleed with a Vol Ground Slam. We will find out. Divine Blessing has been removed. That's the, let's go to the wiki here. That's the one that just let you temporarily cast an aura, right? Yeah, wow, they just got rid of Divine Blessing. Interesting. So, I mean, realistically, the only people that were using, I like this change, is where I'm going. The only people that were really using Divine Blessing were people using Eldritch Battery, and it kind of made it like a no-brainer to just always go Eldritch Battery on any kind of topside build, because reserving all of your mana plus getting essentially an extra free aura all the time was just so strong compared to any actual mana-reliant setup. So I think it's really good. I like removing that gem. I think it's kind of silly. Oh, but March of the Legion does still have it, so probably going to see more March of the Legionnaires. Alright, following skills no longer have the physical tag. Just quickly, I didn't realize a lot of these even had the physical tag. Blade Flurry, Blade Flurry of Incision, the Cleave versions, Cyclone, Lancing Steel, Perforate, Shrapnel Ballista, Split Arrow, Sweep, Vol Blade Flurry, Vol Cleave. This is actually kind of a nerf to a couple of these, like in particular, Shrapnel Ballista. You want a couple of extra levels on the skill gem because it gets you an extra ballista, and so now removing the physical tag, that's going to make that harder. Previously you'd go for like a physical skill gems thing on your amulet to hit that extra level you needed to get an extra ballista, so that is actually a bit of a nerf there. Multi-strike and awaken multi-strike now describe that they cannot support travel skills rather than every travel skill. Alright, that makes sense. Also no retaliation skills for multi-strike. Some attacks that can be used ranged or melee have had their weapon requirements split between the base gem and their transfigure gem. Okay. Frenzy gem now requires a bow or wand, while Frenzy of Onslaught requires a melee weapon or unarmed. Interesting. Frenzy of Onslaught is like mega trash though, so I guess just no more Frenzy melee basically. Ellie hit now requires a melee, while hit at Spectrum requires a bow or wand. Puncture now requires a bow, while Puncture of Shanking requires a dagger, claw, or sword. Elemental arrows fired from Prismatic or Blink Arrow now correctly use skill damage conversion. Okay. Oh, so that's a order of precedence thing. Yeah, the built-in skill damage conversion will supersede these other things. Ellie arrows from Prismatic or Blink Arrow clones now only deal damage of their chosen element. Alright. Absolution, 180%, scaling up to 200. Previously it was 200 all levels. Absolution of Inspiring, same thing. Ancestral Cry no longer grants a buff that gives you bonus armor in melee range. Okay, instead the user and nearby allies gain a buff that grants Ellie res. That sounds bad compared to armor and melee range, but okay. Because it's one of those things where like you always want to have your Ellie res capped without any kind of conditional buff, so that's kind of useless. Okay, but also +1 to all maximum Ellie res per 10 power and can count a maximum of 30 power. I think unique mobs only have 25, so you'd have to get some extra Warcry power counted built in there somewhere. But I guess that's cool. You know, some extra max res, I suppose, is alright. And presumably still has the other parts of it, yeah, that make it so you hit extra targets. Armageddon Brand, 180 to 200, was 200 at all levels. Interesting, this seems to be a theme they're going to be doing on a lot of spells, making it so they actually have scaling damage effectiveness. Yep, same thing, damage effectiveness. Artillery Ballista, 9 at level 1, previously 7. Interesting. More mana on Artillery Ballista, and its variants. Bane. Buff at level 1, buff at late game. So, Bane buffs on both versions. Barrage, mana cost of 6, previously 7, so slight mana cost reduction on Barrage. Barrage of Volley Fire, same deal. Battle Mage's Cry no longer grants a buff that boosts critical strike chance and allows attacks to benefit from increases to spell damage. Alright, there's our nerf to the Giga Strength stackers people were asking for. Instead, you gain a buff that boosts critical strike chance. The buff grants 0.5% critical strike chance per 5 power, count a maximum of 25. So that's pretty strong. I mean, that's 2.5% crit chance, assuming you're getting max power, so that could be pretty solid, actually, to use in a lot of builds still. Berserk. No longer more damage with attacks, attack speed, or movement speed, or less damage taken. Alright, so what does it grant now? It now grants increased rage effect. Interesting. So they are pretty well killing any sort of usage of Rage and Berserk for spellcasters. That's all gone. Captain Lance will be sad. He uses that on a lot of his builds, ways to generate Rage and just permanent Berserk on spellcasters. Looks like Berserk is pretty well gone for casters now. Blade Flurry no longer gains flat physical damage, but has much higher percent damage. Yeah, so no flat fizz anymore, but much higher damage effectiveness. And a little higher mana cost. Same deal, Blade Flurry of Incision, though it actually has slightly less damage, which is interesting. Blade Storm, scaling up to 14, level 20, now has 159%. Previously it was 105 at level 1, up to 291 from 150. Dude, I'm so excited to actually be able to play a bunch of these melee builds that are now going to be slightly stronger without totems than they were with totems. That is so nice. Though, you know, there are some other sort of tangential nerfs. Berserk is a bit weaker overall, but regardless. I imagine all these Blade Storms are going to be about the same. Yep, looks like it. Blast Rain, mana changes, Blight. Oh, let's see here. Blight, buff, and buff. Blight buff's nice. I like Blight as a Chaos Dot skill, so buffs are cool on that. Bone Nova, here we go, up to 150. That's still not going to be enough to really convince anybody to use Ulnatal's Embrace. But okay, especially with the new numbers on stuff, 150 is still pretty bad. Obviously, I'm going to get there, but I'll be quite interested to see if Shockwave support got much of a damage buff. Bone Shatter has a huge mana cost. Holy moly, 9 at level 1 up to 12 was previously 5 at all levels. My goodness. And no longer has the extra strike range, but has quite a bit of extra damage, but not as much, which makes sense, I suppose. Bone Shatter's been kind of the meta melee skill, so I guess it makes sense it wouldn't get quite as much buff as some of these other skills did. Similar things on the other Bone Shatter variants. Burning Arrow no longer has the flat added fire damage, and got a pretty substantial percentage damage buff in lieu of that. Burning Arrow Vigor got more mana cost. Call to Arms has been renamed to Auto Exertion. It now reserves 15% mana per supported Warcry to cause those war cries to be repeatedly triggered. Support can now support multiple war cries and no longer causes them to share cooldowns. Gives them increased cooldown recovery rate, but they don't grant buffs or charges, so they would only do their exert thing, no buffs or charges. It also now cannot support retaliation skills. Interesting. I mean, it kind of sucks to have to reserve mana to auto Warcry, but it does come with some upsides, and I could still see this being used by some people. Caustic Arrow of Poison, up to the percentage damage, no more flat chaos damage. Chain Hook. Now has a mana cost of 5, so they actually reduced the mana cost on Chain Hook at early levels. No longer grants 1 rage, instead it grants gain 2 rage on attack hit. But that can only happen once every 0.5 seconds, so it's still really not great. Though, man, it scales up pretty large. 393 at gem level 20, that's not terrible. I mean, it's still going to be a lot weaker than some of these other things, but not bad. Charged Dash. Got more than double damage on Charge Dash. That's good. Obviously, we lost totems, but still more than double damage there, so that's still going to end up being a net buff. Cleave no longer has Flat Fizz, and it goes up to 511 at gem level 20. Pretty solid, that sounds like to me. How does Cleave of Rage here now work? What do we got? No longer 1 rage if the skill hits any enemies, instead has gained 2 rage on attack hit, but again, that can only happen once every 0.5 seconds. Let me go back up to where they talked about rage here. How did this work? Many sources of rage can now generate. There is now a shared cooldown preventing you from generating rage on hit from more than... Okay, so it sounds like you can stack a bunch of these rage generating on hit effects to get a lot of rage per hit, but they all share a cooldown of 0.5 seconds. That makes more sense than how I interpreted that before. Back to Cleave. Alright. That makes sense. Cobra Lash, no flat chaos damage anymore, but more damage effectiveness. Cold Snap, got that same changing damage effectiveness. Consecrated Path. Scales up to 417%. Previously it was 230. That's alright, I guess. 305 on Consecrated Path of Endurance. Crackling Lance, yeah, this is more of the same spells, just getting some damage effectiveness changes at early levels. Cyclone no longer gains any Flat Fizz, but has quite a bit more damage, as one would expect. Cyclone of Tumult, same deal. Here we go, Defiance Banner. Yeah, you gain Valor from melee combat to use this skill, which will consume all Valor, replace a banner with an R. The R will be larger and more powerful when more Valor is consumed. The banner lasts for a duration, but will end early if you leave the aura or use the skill again while it's active. While you have no placed banner, you can gain Valor. Now has a base duration of 10 seconds and a base radius of 2.4 meters. Provides 5% more AoE and 5% more aura effect per Valor consumed. Both scaling up to 10% at level 20. The banner grants movement speed and chance to suppress spell damage. Also minus damage from suppressed hits. Alright, we'll have to see how some of these play out. And, oh man, the double whammy on Desecrate for Detonate Dead. Not only did they make it so you can't detonate your Spectre corpses from Desecrate, but they also chopped off 20 levels off the maximum corpse level it can summon. And we saw this, yeah, Determination, the same is going to be for Grace, approximately chopped in half on the amount of flat they did. That's to make up for the fact that you should be getting quite a bit more flat from various gear pieces now with all the new bases and stuff. Dominating Blow goes up to 458 at gem level 20. That's pretty solid, and in particular Dominating Blow of Inspiring, that's actually a pretty solid number because I believe Dominating Blow, yeah, is a full speed melee attack, so that's quite a lot of damage. Nice. Doriani's Touch got up to 1000% damage effectiveness. Nice. Double Strike, no Flat Fizz to bleeding enemies anymore, but instead up to 409% damage. Nice. Same on Double Strike of Impaling. Double Strike of Momentum. Very similar kind of thing. Dread Banner, what does Dread Banner do now? Blah, 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 blah. We don't care about all this stuff. The banner grants chance to block attack damage and also causes life recovery on block up to 34 at gem level 20. So how much Valor can these things gain by default? I'm not sure if max Valor is listed here. I'm just wondering how much of that aura effect can you get. 10% per Valor. I'm not sure how much Valor you can get. That could potentially give you quite a lot of block and life on block. Don't Desecrate. Players just want a level 25 Desecrate to reach monster level 100. I'm not totally sure on that. Maximum level corpses spawned is now 20 at gem level 1, scaling up. Yeah, I mean, it's possible that maybe you just need more extra levels to get up to level 100. That may not be the cap anymore, but regardless, that's still another nerf. You're going to need a bunch of extra gem levels on Desecrate, which isn't something you were typically pumping gem levels into. And the fact that they chopped out the ability to detonate Spectre Corpses is going to be a huge damage nerf as well to detonate dead. So I'm sure it'll still be okay, but it's definitely losing a lot, which it deserved to, because it's been standing out as something pretty overpowered for like a bunch of leagues in a row now. Dual Strike, I'll be interested to see how Ambidexterity here goes. Dual Strike, 442 from 244, alright. Quite heavy mana costs on some of these melee gems. Definitely going to have to work a little more to solve your mana problems on some of these melee setups. Dual Strike of Ambidexterity is from up to 360 from 244, so not as big of a gem as the base version, but obviously that gets multiplied again by how Dual Strike of Ambidexterity works. Earthquake. Yeah, I know, right? Desecrate and Detonate Dead have been brain dead for a while. I think it's glad that they are going to require a little more work to get somewhere now. And just the top end was definitely chopped way down. Regardless of the Desecrate corpse level, chopping out the Spectre corpses makes a huge difference in how much damage those builds will do. So Earthquake now goes up to 229, which was previously 150. And Earthquake is what? Yeah, 180% extra. So 229 times 2.8, that gets Earthquake up to 641. That's not really super amazing. I think they already showed that like Sweep has a higher damage effectiveness than that now, so that'll be better for bleed. Though potentially Earthquake of Amplification is going to get you there even higher. Earth Shatter, 393 from 200, so just about doubled on Earth Shatter. Same thing for Fragility, Prominence. Prominence got an even bigger buff. That's pretty nice. Though Prominence is too janky to use very well. I've tried to make Prominence work a couple times and it just feels really clunky. Elemental Hit. Let's see, what do we got here? I kind of just want the gem level 20 stuff. 748. Alright, so it's buffs on Ellie Hit. Alright, Ellie Hit of the Spectrum. How about you? This is just the melee version. So I'm guessing probably of the Spectrum didn't get as big of a buff, or maybe even got a nerf. It got a tiny buff, so didn't get as much as the regular Ellie Hit did. Enduring Cry. No longer life regen or resistances and physical damage reduction. Instead, you gain a buff that gives life regen. The buff grants 2% of life regenerated per second per 5 power. Okay, and you get times 10, so that could give you up to 10% life regenerated on a unique enemy. The base duration is 2.5 seconds, goes up to 3.4. Additionally, nearby allied players are also granted endurance charges. Alright, so 10% life regen that you could potentially keep up pretty high uptime on bosses. And Ensnaring, I mean, well, yeah, I guess Ensnaring Arrow also just increases bow damage taken. I guess the always moving was not a built-in part. Essence Drain. What do we got? A buff on Essence Drain damage, nice. Of Desperation, I think that one's still like unusable because you just kill yourself if you actually do any damage with it. EK, so more spell stuff, just getting damage effectiveness changes. Explosive Concoction. What do we got? Scaling up to this at 20, so quite a bit more damage on Explosive Concoction all around. Nice. Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for checking in. See you later. Have a good sleep. Exsanguinate, more damage effectiveness stuff. Just want to make sure these are all indeed just damage effectiveness. Yes, they are. Flesh and Stone, we saw the changes on in the reveal movie. Take up to 10% less damage from nearby enemies while in sand. And what was the damaging one? Nearby enemies take up to 10% more physical damage. Oh, only from hits one bloodstance. Interesting. So there's a little nerf to the potential bleed ideas. Flicker Strike is up to 408, so almost doubled damage on Flicker Strike. Same with Flicker Strike Power. Frenzy of Onslaught. I feel like this needs more changes to be useful. They made it so Frenzy is only with ranged weapons now, and Frenzy of Onslaught is only with melee weapons, but Frenzy of Onslaught is just freaking bad. Frostblades no longer has flat cold damage. Scaling up to... Jeez. I mean, I know the cold damage was pretty big in general for Frostblades because you usually use it on a really fast hitting weapon. But man, they more than doubled it. That's pretty wild. Frostblades is going to be really strong now, I feel like. Frostbomb for this is just more damage effectiveness on all of these. Quality now provides projectiles that have pierced deal more damage. So I guess if you were using like a returning projectiles on Frostbolt, that would be fairly strong. Frozen Legion, let's see, it went up to 332. Yeah, I figured it probably wouldn't be getting a very large damage boost. Kind of hoped it might, but it didn't. Only 332 from 281, but still nice. I mean, I guess the thing with that is they probably did not buff the damage as much on things that only benefited from one of the ancestral totems. Because like Frozen Legion didn't scale with attack speed, it only scaled with the damage. I just wanted to see how much damage did Ancestral Warchief did. Like 18, and then he got another 50, so like 30% more damage potentially from Ancestral Warchief, and it went from 281 to 332, so approximately knocking it out. Frenzy with charge and quality stacking used to be pretty good. Yeah, Frenzy used to be pretty solid for melee, and it's still going to be for range, but I'm sad that they made it so melee can only use Frenzy of Onslaught now, because Frenzy of Onslaught is rubbish. The regular Frenzy is still pretty solid, but it is only ranged weapons now, unfortunately. Galvanic Arrow. So they're pretty much getting rid of like all of the flat damages on attacks and upping the percent damages correspondingly, interestingly. Galvanic Arrow of Energy. This one needs a way bigger buff. Galvanic Arrow of Energy is so freaking bad. They could way up the damage on this to make it actually useful. Galvanic Field. This is just more damage effectiveness. General's Cry. 60% less at gem level 1. Yeah, I guess it makes sense that they would nerf that with how much they buffed baseline melee skills. Glacial Cascade of the Fissure. Glacial Hammer. No more flat cold. Goes up to 622 at gem level 20. Holy smokes. The old Glacial Hammer, this is a buff meme. They're bringing it back 6 years later. 622 from 269. That's pretty wild. 622 minus 269. Wow, can't type. Divided by 269. 131% more damage to Glacial Hammer. That's pretty wild. Grace. As we anticipated, it actually didn't get hit quite as hard as As Determination did. It didn't quite get chopped in half. Ground Slam. I want to know about Vol Ground Slam, but that might be in a separate section. Ground Slam, 356 at gem level 20. 688 on Ground Slam of Earth Shaking. That's not bad. Let's go back to the wiki. Ground Slam. It's how much? Gets you... that is only hits, unfortunately. But yeah, I want to see how high Vol Ground Slam went to see if that would possibly be relevant for, like, a bleed build. Ground Slam of Earth Shaking, yeah, 688 is pretty solid. Hatred. I wish they went the other way with this change. Hatred no longer causes you and nearby allies to deal more cold damage. You and nearby allies now gain bigger percent of Fizz as cold. I wish they went the other way with it because I feel like Hatred is one of the main offenders that makes it so Ellie conversion is just like always the better way to go on attack builds. And this just leans into that even harder, so I'm not a huge fan on that. I wish they had removed the Fizz added as cold, and maybe just upped the more cold and perhaps added something extra to it. But whatever, it is what it is. Heavy Strike, 552. That's pretty solid because it also has, what, I think 40% chance to deal double damage at a gem level 21. And also, I feel like, you know, one of the things they did with this patch, making quality multiplicative, that's a big buff to physical weapons. But with Hatred still adding Fizz as cold, that's just even more encouraging you to go Fizz to cold conversion, which is a little lame. But yeah, 40% double damage, and it would be even a little higher, so you can effectively multiply that, and you end up with quite a lot of... Yeah, and it no longer knocks enemies back on hit. Just has the double damage and presumably still has the reduced enemy stun threshold. Yes, indeed. Herald of Ash. I'm just kind of trying to keep a mental note of if I do decide to start with some kind of bleed melee build, which skill is going to be the biggest for it. I still think the biggest number is the one that we saw on Sweep in the reveal, but we'll see. Herald of Ash. Dang it, they went the same way on Herald of Ash as they did with Hatred as well. Herald of Ash no longer grants more spell fire damage, instead it's extra amount of physical as fire. Hex Blast. This is more just damage effectiveness changes. Ice Crash. Previously, yeah, scaling up to 611, 350. Did Ice Crash have... I can't remember. Does it inner one do like more damage or anything? No, it doesn't. Though it does have Fizz as extra cold built in. Same deal on Ice Crash of Cadence. So interesting. 611, that's pretty solid. Ice Crash of Cadence, not quite as big, but if you're going to dual wield, that's probably a pretty solid option now. Especially on like Gladiator, that actually looks like a pretty good option now. 80% more damage with main hand weapon. 100% Fizz damage converted to cold. Hey, what's up, Jay Morgan? Yeah, I don't know. Ice Crash of Cadence might be an interesting one. We'll have to see on that. Ice Nova is just more damage effectiveness changes. Ice Shot of Penetration, mana. All of this stuff. Oh, let's see. Icicle Burst. Wow, 150, just like the bleed spikes on the stupid axe. Infernal Blow, no flat fire damage anymore, instead scales up to 377 at gem level 20. That's definitely a way to go if you're going to go melee ignite. That's going to give you a pretty freaking enormous ignite if you actually stack up all those. I'm doing pretty good just reading through these enormous Path of Exile patch notes. My throat is getting sore from speaking too much. Intimidating Cry no longer lowers enemy physical damage mitigation. Instead, it grants move speed for its buff. That's interesting, I guess, and presumably still the double damage. Nothing about changing the amount of exerted attacks. I wonder if those are going to be in new things on the passive tree. I don't specifically recall seeing that on the passive tree changes earlier, but maybe it was. Kinetic Blast. Increases reduction of spell damage. Wait. Now has an attack speed of 115. Oh, and spell damage built in. I'm just going fine. I haven't streamed in months, so I don't expect anybody to be watching here. Hopefully I'll be able to stream the new league. It sounds like my internet is... Seems like my internet is actually holding up decent enough most of the time that I might be able to stream okay at league start. Kinetic Bolt of Fragmentation, Lacerate. What do we got here? Lacerate went from 154 to 393. Lacerate of Butchering went up to 629. That's decent. Lacerate of Hemorrhage went up to 346. Let's go look at Lacerate here. So it's got 88% more damage with bleeding while in Blood Stance. It has the downside of not being usable with Moroi Urki. But what do we got here? It's going up to 393. This is Path of Exile. Well, this is patch notes for Path of Exile, but new Path of Exile League is launching in approximately a week from today, and a giant reveal was today, so I'm going through all the patch notes and figuring out what's changed. So 88% more, and we got 393 times 1.88. 738, that's pretty high up there. That's almost like the sweep that we saw earlier. So that might be a decent option. How does Lacerate of Hemorrhage work? Enemies in the middle of the slashes can be hit by both. Just has extra more damage with bleeding. Looks like it goes up to about 172. And it goes up to 346. That'd be 346 times 2.72. That's pretty large. 941 or less. Is this... Oh, it's only one-handed, though. Still good if you want to go one-handed, but I don't think that's going to get you your biggest bleeds possible. Lancing Steel, got a little bit of a buff. Lancing Steel of Spraying, a little bit of a buff as well. I think people were maybe thinking these were going to take some hits for cast on crit, but it looks like they really didn't. Leap Slam, still not useful as a damaging skill. Oh, have I reached 100 followers? That's interesting. Leap Slam of Ground Breaking goes up to 660. That's not a terrible one, but it's still got like a really short range and is slow, so probably not a great option. Lightning Arrow of Electrocution, Lightning Spire Trap. I don't care about these ones that didn't really get significant changes in any way. Lightning Strike, 273 or 237 from 163, so not a huge buff on that. Lightning Strike of Arcing, similar. Lightning Tendrils, all this stuff is just damage effectiveness. Molten Burst now has 170% effectiveness of base and added damage. Amazing. If only they would buff the base item so that it actually did any damage whatsoever. Molten Shell. What do we got here? Oh, this is Molten Shell and then Molten Strike. Okay. So, looks like higher strength requirement at lower levels and higher armor granted at lower levels. I mean, I've been streaming on and off for years, but I only do like one stream every 6 months or whatever, and it's been a long time because my internet has not been good for streaming for a long time. It's just something I do casually for fun now and then. Molten Strike, no longer any flat fire. Goes up to 329 from 185. That's pretty good. In fact, that's really good considering Molten Strike is one of the ones that only benefited from Ancestral Protector and not both totems. Molten Strike of the Zenith gosh, that skill's going to do so much damage because that's another one that only benefited from the protector. But they gave it like almost double damage. Jeez. I guess it's going to take you longer to get to your every 5th hit since you are going to be missing the attack speed from protector, but still, that's so much freaking damage. Spells are all just damage effectiveness. Perforate. Where do we go here? Went up to 622. Holy smokes. 622 divided by 265. Jeez, 130% more damage on Perforate. That is wild. Perforate of Bloodshed is rubbish, unfortunately. It sounded like Crimson Dance didn't actually get changed. It was like maybe it's still the same. You can inflict bleed up to 8 times. 50% less damage with bleeding. Yeah, I mean, it's just still not going to be nearly as good as a moving damage bleed with something that actually does a large single hit. Perforate of Duality got the same buff as the regular one. Man, those are really high damage skills now. That is an enormous buff. Jane Morgan, this is starting to sound like a marketing pitch, is why I'm not really responding to you anymore. So, sorry. I'm happy to answer questions about Path of Exile or whatever, but marketing pitches I'm not interested in. Pestilent Strike. What is Pestilent Strike? I can't even remember which skill that is. Is that the one that like builds up pestilence and then when you kill the enemy it spreads? Yeah, poisons on the slain enemy, indeed. Let's see. So it went up to 472 instead of 160. No more flat chaos, but holy smokes, that one got a giant buff as well. 472 divided. Was it 160 before? Really gave it an almost 3 times damage on the Pestilent Strike. Holy smokes, dude. That is enormous. Poisonous Concoction. Got a slight buff. As did the of Bouncing version. Power Siphon. Power Siphon of the Archmage I'm more interested in. They did buff these wanting skills overall, gave them that extra base attack speed and also spell damage stuff built into all the wanting skills now. Yeah, so that didn't get changed other than the attack speed. Puncture, as it said, is now only a bow thing. They did actually give it some buffs, which is good because bleed bow was getting nerfed slightly actually overall this league with a couple of the other changes, but that brings it up to about where it was, and now melee bleed is actually competitive. Purifying Flame, this is more just damage effectiveness. Rage Vortex, how did they change Rage Vortex? Scaling up to, so not a lot of extra damage effectiveness. And Rage Storm now deals 10% more damage per 1 rage sacrifice instead of 5, but you can't sacrifice nearly as many rage because you can't get nearly as many. Sounds alright, I guess. Rain of Arrows, blah blah blah, mana cost changes, Raise Spectre of Transience, can no longer use Spectral Corpses. Oh, interesting. So if you're going to use the of Transience, which gives them the big crit damage buff and stuff, you can't use them on corpses that you toss down. Rallying Cry. Buff now grants added attack damage equal to 3% up to a maximum of 30 power. Previously was a maximum of up to 20% main hand damage. 3% per 5 power, so that's 3 times 6, so it's actually nerfed on the flat damage you add. That seems iffy. Reap, damage effectiveness, Reave. That's a big Reave buff. Scaling up to 534%. Let me just do a little check here. Ancestral Warchief. I need to get this into my head. How much damage actually were Warchief and Protector getting together before? So it gave 20, which stayed the same. So it gave 30% more attack speed, and Warchief 19 times 1 point was giving 28. So you had 1 times 1.3 times 1.28. So together, assuming you took Panopticon, Warchief and Protector were giving 66% more damage. And then you've got some of these skills like Reave, which hits a big area and it gained more than doubled damage. Man, that sounds strong, yo. Kind of want to play Reave now. That got a really big buff. Rolling Magma, Scourge Arrow. Let's see. Alright, Seismic Cry. What does this do now? Nothing to do with stun. The user and nearby allies. Okay, now rather than granting a buff that makes it easier for you to stun, you gain increased armor and stun threshold. The buff grants 5% more armor per 5 power, so 1 per power. So that's 25% more armor if you Seismic Cry on a boss. Counting a maximum of 25 power. Exerted attacks now have 50% more area of effect, and exerts the next 6 melee slams. Now it's a 2.5 second duration. That's just the buff on the armor, but yeah, you get 6 slams with 50% more area of effect. That's pretty good. Shattering Steel. We went from 159 to 265. Same kind of deal with ammunition. Shrapnel Ballista actually got buffed slightly as well. Shield Charge. I was interested in shield skills because we haven't gotten down to uniques yet, but also assuming that Emperor's Vigilance is going to be really strong with that multiplicative quality bonus. So also potentially thinking of a shield chart or a shield build starter. Now has a mana cost of... Okay, so the mana cost actually didn't change on Shield Charge. Now has a level requirement of 4 at gem level 1, previously 10. Alright, so what we care about here, 252 to 378. So it got quite a lot of extra flat. And goes up to 8 to 12. So it gets 10. Have to see if you get an extra one at another level, but previously it was 6. So that's like, what is 4 divided by 6? Why can't I do that in my head? Yeah, so that's 66% more, and I decided that's about exactly what it had from the totems. So it got a little more flat base, and in terms of the scaling, I would guess the flat base is about the same. So it looks like it didn't really get buffed relative at all. Maybe they're realizing that everyone and their dog is going to be using Emperor's Vigilance with shield builds now, so they just exactly compensated for the totem removal. Shield Crush, very similar. Shield Crush of the Chieftain, 13 to 20. Previously 8 to 12, so it was 10. It's getting a lot of flat base damage as well. Scaling up to 13 to 20. What is 13 plus 20 divided by 2? 16.5. Just wondering if realistically Shield Crush of the Chieftain could work for Ignite and actually be competitive with anything. I don't really think so, but possibly. Those don't wow me nearly as much as some of the other new melee things, but the new crazy buffed Emperor's Vigilance might be pretty OP regardless. Siege Ballista of Splintering. Smite, 488 from 273. Jeez. Might have to do some Rakietta's Dance Smite again. And 369 on the Divine Judgment. I can't actually even remember exactly how Divine Judgment differs from the usual one. Oh, by the way, did they get rid of the Smite? Okay, no, so they didn't get rid of the damage on it. That makes sense because it's like an aura. 273, 250, same attack speed. More area damage. Ah, okay, that's the difference. More area damage on that. Solid buffs there. Snipe, Spectral Helix, Spectral Shield Throw went from 5 to... Ooh, it didn't get buffed nearly as much as the Shield Crushes did. Spectral Throw up to 150. Not as big of a buff there. Splitting Steel. No flat fizz damage anymore. The interesting side effect is that the removal of a lot of these flat damages is like a indirect nerf to Void Forge, unfortunately. Getting caught in the crossfire there. Static Strike. 346 from 188, that's pretty solid. Storm Rain, Storm Blast Mine, blah blah blah. Sunder is 629. Sunder of Earthbreaking, 503. Sweep. That's not quite as big as it looked like they had initially showed in the trailer. I thought it was over 700-ish, but 644, or 664 rather, on sweep. Still pretty good. Another thing is that these are even bigger buffs for melee bleed because Ancestral Warchief didn't even work for bleed. Because, yeah, it was only melee damage, not ailment damage. So, yeah, I think you're going to be able to get some pretty freaking juicy melee bleeds at this point. Tectonic Slam, 542. More nothing burgers here. Venom Gyre, Vigilant Strike. Whoa! Vigilant Strike up to 745% damage effectiveness. Holy smokes. Vigilant Strike. That might be your winner bleed applier. Unfortunately, only more attack damage rather than more damage per endurance charge, but still 745. My goodness. Viper Strike up 392, so it got more than doubled. Viper Strike of the Mamba. Holy smokes. Like, I know they got rid of the easy access to all damage can poison, so you don't just, like, get a freebie with Rebuke of the Vol and Viper Strike of the Mamba anymore. But obviously, you were using Viper Strike of the Mamba for poison, which didn't care at all about Ancestral Totems to begin with, but they still more than doubled the damage on it. So you're going to be able to get some really freaking fat poisons out of Viper Strike of the Mamba at this point. Wood Sphere of Ending, Volcanic Fissure from 185 to 344. Of Snaking, only going up to 318. Voltaxic Burst is trash. Vulnerability, Quality now provides attack hits against cursed enemies have chance to aggravate bleeding. Alright, and we'll have to see how much aggravate is available on the main tree. War Banner does what now? Banner grants increased accuracy, more physical damage with melee skills. So that's good for dropping a big fat bleed on something. Just more physical damage, not more physical attack damage. That's really nice. Warlord's Mark no longer has cursed enemies grant rage when stunned, or rage over 1 second. Now it just grants a flat 10 rage when they're stunned. Alright. Whirling Blades, 314 on the Whirling Blades, baby. Wild Strike of Extremes, meh. Alright, the Vol versions. Vol Blade Flurry up to 690. Vol Blade, Vol Cleave, 726. But can't be exerted. And I guess that's one reason why Vigilant Strike probably wouldn't be as good as some of those other options, is it can't be exerted. So you wouldn't be able to use Vigilant Strike, Impale with the Aulas and charge stacking. Yeah, if you want to go with direct damage, for sure. I think that Vigilant Strike number seems pretty freaking wild. That could be fat with an Endurance charge stacker, definitely. I'm looking at it from a bleed perspective. And I'm thinking you're going to want to use like Echoes of Creation and stuff if you're going bleed and juice it up with Warcry, so you probably want to stick to slams anyways. About what you would expect on most of the Vol ones versus the regular ones. I wanted to see... Where's Ground Slam? Was Ground Slam really not changed at all? Vol Ground... Oh, there it is. 522. That's pretty solid. That could be a pretty fat number when it's juiced up as Vol Ground Slam is. Blah blah blah. Anything interesting on any of these? Vol Reap, of course, got upgraded. That Reap damage change is crazy. They give Reap like more than double the damage. Could be really good, I think. Support Gem Balance. What do we got here? Chance to bleed. Can now support skills that create minions. Interesting. No longer has any flat physical damage on it. Scales up to 29% more damage with bleeding. That's alright, I guess. Makes it a reasonably decent support gem. Nice for throwing on things where you're struggling to cap out that bleed chance early and not feel so bad about it as it used to. Decay buffed. Earthbreaker granted by the Dawnstrider boots. Okay, it now goes to 19% more damage, so that doesn't make you feel so bad, I suppose, about using it as a 5-link. It's still not great, but could be okay. Fist of War no longer has more damage with ailments. Oh, really? Oh, instead, the Ancestral Boosted Slams deal more damage with hits. Now applies to ailments at the same value. Holy smokes, dude. Melee bleed. So now you get the 98, 100 if you have a level 21. My goodness. Melee bleed is looking scary. Impending Doom. Blah. Increased duration has been changed to more duration, as you would expect. Interesting. Alright. Oh, and the quality was changed. So, yeah, I mean, in certain builds, that's going to make a significant difference in the amount of duration you're getting from that. Infused Channeling is now int dex. No longer has infusion lasts after you finish channeling. While channeling a supported skill, take 8% less damage from all hits. Supported skills now deal 20% more damage, scaling up to 29. And quality adds extra less damage taken from hits. So the infusion thing is just gone. Now it's just you take less damage from hits while channeling, and it gives more damage than it did previously, but no infusion buff. Alright. Now causes supported skills to have less instead of reduced. Alright, on Inspiration. That's a nerf. Prismatic Burst. What about Shockwave? I was wondering on Shockwave. 336 from 260. That, let's look at that. 336 minus 260 divided by 260. 29%. That is pretty much exactly what Ancestral Warchief gave before, so Shockwave essentially unchanged. Except that now you don't need to have a Warchief down to get that. Trauma. Ooh, trauma support nerfed quite a bit in the amount of flat physical it's giving. Urgent Orders. Oh, interesting. Got rid of the extra cooldown on Urgent Orders. Now instead it just has a really big mana multiplier. How much Warcry speed does Urgent Orders give? Gives 80 if you had a level 21 with 20 quality. Yeah, no longer cooldown. That's pretty solid if you're wanting to, you know, do something like a bleed build where you're not really wanting to invest in a bunch of Warcry stuff, but you want to pop a bunch for Echoes of Creation when you need a big single target burst. Ascendancy changes. Here we go. What do we get on these? Crave the Slaughter no longer provides plus 10 max range or 1 rage on hit with attacks. Instead, it provides every rage also grants increased attack speed. Inherent rage loss starts 2 seconds later. And the small passive prior causes you to gain 1 rage on melee hit. Alright. Rite of Ruin, no longer tripled or can be stunned. It now provides 50% increased rage effect. Is that good? It's not amazing. But I mean, rage is a more multiplier now. I feel like this leans pretty heavily into a direct damage slammer build. Like, Berserker was already kind of the way to go with that, but that makes it even better for that now. So I think if you're going to be doing a direct damage slammer rather than a bleed slammer, you almost certainly want to go with Berserker. Warbringer, no longer grant rage per power, blah blah blah. It now provides Warcries exert twice as many attacks. That's pretty good, because presumably there is still, like, the note on the tree for 1 extra exert. You could use, like, an impact force propagator. You could theoretically be exerting, like, 8 attacks with Intimidating Cry for double damage. Could be cool, I guess. Chieftain. Tawa Force Strength has been removed. Alright. Wait. I wish we had just a picture of this. Let me get a path of building here. Chieftain. So, first let's look at the next one here. Arawangwi has been replaced with a new one. So that was the totem one, correct? Yes, so that's gone. What has it been replaced with? Which provides Warcries have infinite power and 30% increased Warcry buff effect. Interesting. So you can get the infinite power on two-handers now, if that's something you really care about, rather than using the shield, whatever the shield's called, Redblade Banner. And so they just decided they don't like Tawas anymore. This is good. This might be leaning me back towards actually going Chieftain for a Bleed Slammer rather than Gladiator. Like, Gladiator is nice, but Fist of War being buffed so that it now applies makes that like an extra strong link. And now it sounds like you can get to Tukohama War's Herald without having to go through Tawa Force Strength. Which ones is it connected to now? Tukohama War's Herald now requires Shion or Hinekora. Which one is this one? No, that's right. Hinekora is the Fire Explode. So you can either take that or the Infinite Power to get to Tukohama War's Herald. You probably would not want Hinekora Death's Fury if you were going to be doing Bleed. I think you'd probably rather just use like Hemophilia Gloves if you were going to go that way. So probably you would go through the new one that gives infinite Warcry power and increased Warcry buff effect. And then you would grab the usual Fire Res stuff that you're getting anyways on Chieftain. Interesting. That's definitely one to consider. I'll have to see. One thing that's going to determine that a bunch is how much accessibility there is of the whatever the Gladiator thing is that makes it so or not gladiator thing, but whatever the thing is that makes it so enemies count as if they were moving while they're bleeding. If that is reasonably accessible on the tree, then I don't think you really need to go gladiator. But if it's really hard to get and you're going for like a big freaking slow slam, so it's going to be hard to get a bunch of hits anyways, then you might go with chieftain. Hard to say. But interesting. Cool changes. This new node sounds pretty sweet. And maybe even makes it so there is an argument to go chieftain rather than berserker if you want to go direct damage slams. Berserker definitely going to have more damage just because of Warbringer. And with the new stuff, with the rage, like Berserker's definitely going to do more damage, but again, chieftain gives you access to Salio and Voloko. Definitely some interesting trade-offs potentially there. Juggernaut, no longer Chaos Res per endurance charge or reduced. Okay. Instead, it now provides an additional 1% elemental damage reduction per endurance charge. Alright. Unbreakable. Wait. No longer provides 8% of armor applies to fire, cold, and lightning damage. Instead, it has 15% of armor also applies to chaos damage. What was it I was looking at earlier that had some chaos thing on it that I was... There's something else now that gives maximum chaos res that you can combine with divine flesh. And that in combination now with 15% of your armor applying to chaos damage, that is like some insane levels of mitigation on Juggernaut. Champion. The Unstoppable Hero Ascendancy passive has swapped places with Fortitude. So that's the Fortify and the bonuses with Fortify one. Yeah, so those two have switched. And... Wait, what? Unstoppable Hero no longer grants the attack speed or the armor or evasion while fortified, or can't be stunned. Instead, it provides nearby allies count as having fortification equal to yours. And fortitude. That's a bit of a weird one. I don't know, man. Now grants when you leave your banner's area, recover 30% of the valor consumed for that banner. That one's alright. And, let's see. Already looked at all the gladiator stuff in another image off stream, so I'm not going to go through the whole gladiator now. More interested in the other different changes. Ooh, we actually nerfed Deadeye a little bit here, though she does have the Raider thing now. More accuracy per frenzy charge, +1 max frenzy charge, and gain a frenzy charge while moving. Yeah, 10% instead of 15% tailwind. Wind Ward is better now, I guess. Far Shot Ascendancy passive no longer actually provides Far Shot. Instead, it now provides projectiles gain damage as they travel farther. So, I mean, you could now combine that with something like the Fledgling. That has Far Shot, right? Yeah, could combine that with something like the Fledgling for even more long-range damage, if you wanted to, potentially. Warden, I've gone through the Warden stuff separately as well, so not going to go through it here. How about the Ascendant? Berserker, no longer 1 rage on hit with attacks, instead it just delays it by 1 second. No longer Totem Taunt, instead Warcry buff effect. Deadeye. Gain a frenzy charge every 3 seconds while moving. That could be okay if you're on some kind of constantly moving Scion build, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, we're just going to ignore all this and see what does it now provide. for the Gladiator. Now provides 20%, 25% chance to aggravate bleeding targets you hit with attacks. 50% base chance to block from equipped shield. Oh, wow. Dude, they gave her a lot of the really good stuff from the Gladiator. That's kind of freaking wild. Interesting. It's now called Warden, no longer provides any of this crap. Instead, it causes attack damage to penetrate 8% of enemy Elirez and lets you have a second tincture. Interesting. I'm not going to go through all of these things, really, I don't think. Not on stream anyway. This is just like so much tedium to read, and I would rather look at all of this stuff on the tree when the new tree becomes available. There are now more notables on the passive tree than there are oil combinations to anoint them all. As a result of this, can no longer anoint ones that give plus 30 to attributes. Interesting general change there. Let's see. I'll go through all the keystone ones at the top here. We saw Volpact is back to instant leech. The Impaler Keystone now provides 5 instead of 4. And for, okay, so they just upped the numbers from 4 to 5 on that. Versatile Combatant has swapped positions with Iron Reflexes and it now provides -10, used to be -25 on both of those. So it's now where Iron Reflexes was. Those two have swapped. Interesting. Warlord's Call is once again known as Call to Arms. No longer provides Warcries, no longer exert attacks, and grant the roof. Instead, it grants 100% more Warcry duration. And Warcries... Wait, what? Oh, that's right, because Warcries by default affect allies now. So now it doubles their duration, but makes it so they don't apply to you. Okay, interesting, I guess. Perfect Agony no longer does what it used to. Instead, it causes damage over time multiplier for ailments to be equal to critical strike multiplier. And causes critical strikes to not deal extra damage and makes it so non-crits cannot inflict ailments. That's interesting. I like that. I don't know how strong it is, but it's cool because it makes crit ailments scale totally differently than regular ailments do. With the old one, you still wanted to get a bunch of damage over time multiplier, but then getting extra crit multi was just kind of like a weakish way to get more. But now, it makes it so your damage over time multiplier is just equal to your critical strike multiplier. Though, support gem changes... Or where? All skill. Was there any for critical strike affliction? Critical strike affliction support. Ported skills. That's odd, because I feel like if you're going to invest into crit, then you're definitely going to go Perfect Agony. So I feel like this doesn't really have a place anymore because Perfect Agony is going to overwrite whatever crit multi you got from that. So that one seems a little iffy to me. I don't particularly think that's a relevant gem anymore. Could have been changed in some way, in my opinion. What else for keystones? Any other keystone changes? No. Here we go. Added a new bleeding passive mastery that provides 25% chance to aggravate bleeding on targets you hit with exerted attacks. If I go to aggravate, I'm wanting to know... Anything which has been aggravated always Does the hit that applies the bleed have to be the one that aggravates? I'm wondering. I'd be interested to know on that. I'm not sure on that. Aggravate bleeding on targets you hit with exerted attacks. How much other exert is there? The bleeding, passive mastery. Effect on poisons, but applies 50% to aggravate the ones you stun. That's not reliable. The bleeding passive mastery that provides 60% increased bleeding duration has been replaced with a new mastery that causes attack hits to aggravate any bleeds that are older than 4 seconds on targets. So it sounds like aggravate, you don't have to aggravate with the hit that bleeds. You can aggravate... I'm not sure still on this, because like this is conditional. I'm not totally clear on that. I might have to ask a question on that. Bloodletting, 10% chance to aggravate bleeding on targets you hit with attacks. Yeah, I'm totally not sure on that yet. And there's an Eldritch implicit for gloves that aggravates bleeding. Interesting. And then we're into a bunch of monster balance stuff, which isn't super interesting here. We got some changes to Kirac League mods. Essence now costs 6. Wow, doubled the cost on Essence. Oh, but also doubled the amount it does. Alright. Abyss, only 4 instead of 6. Ambush, 4 instead of 7, but nerf the number of strong boxes. Harbinger, 4 instead of 6. Same deal. Alright. Press reward changes, we already saw the bandit stuff. Crushing Fist, yeah, some of these new retaliation skills and stuff are now offered as quest rewards. Bug fixes, blah blah blah. Alright, so, overall, sick patch notes. In particular, the melee overhaul is dope. There's like a bunch of melee builds I want to try now. Might be leaning into bleed to begin with. Really excited for passive tree info to be released. Maybe it already has been. I'll have to look into that, maybe see if like PoE plan or something is updated. But anyways, that's my review of the patch notes. We're going on 2 hours here almost. Really pumped for the league. Again, it looks like we have not dropped that many frames throughout this stream, so I may actually be able to stream in the upcoming league. So it seems like maybe Starlink is stable enough at this point that it can actually keep a stream up decently. So, I will see you when the new league starts, either in a stream or in update videos. I am quite excited for this one, so I'm sure I'll be playing it quite a lot.